Okay, so we are going to learn the daf for today. Tractate Shabbos, the first chapter. The name of the chapter is Yetzias Shabbos. We're holding on page 15, and the Schattenstein is 15a1. We ended off yesterday by Gufa. So we'll start with Gufa. It's the second line from the top. The Gemara now returns to two statements cited above as part of the discussion and analyze them. Gufa, Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Shmoina also gosru u'v'shmoina also nechleku. 18 measures were decreed when the vote was taken, and 18 issues the two schools had differed. They argued. Vatanya, but surely we have learned in a baita hushvu, the two schools agreed on these 18 issues, and there was no difference of opinion. The Gemara answers, Boi vayom nechleku u'lemocha hushvu. On that day, they argued, they differed, and on the following day, on the morrow, they agreed. Guf amar Ravuna v'shloisha mekomos nechleku Shama ve'Hillel. 3 places, according to Ravuna, only 3 places Shama and Hillel argued. And what are those cases? Shama imu mikav chalo. Chalo is due to be separated from a dough containing at least 1 kav of flour. How much is 1 kav of flour? According to Beis Shammai, he says in number 5, a kav is a measure of volume equal to 4 lugim. Lugin, another name for a log, is rova, literally a quarter because it measures a quarter of a kav. Each log or rova equals the volume of 6 average chicken eggs, the portion of dough given to the Kohanim. So the Mishnah cites 4 opinions on the matter, among them those of Hillel and Shammai. So kav is a log kav is equal to 4 lugim. 4 lugim, so kav equals to 24 eggs. 24 eggs. So according to Beis Shammai, challah is due to be separated from a dough. You have to do a foshas challah if you have a volume of 24 eggs. But Hillel says from at least 2 kabim, so meaning you have to have a dough of that consisting 48 eggs. The rabbis neither like the words of Shammai nor like the words of Hillel. Ela kav u'mechza chayav b'chal. Whether if you have kav u'mechza, which is we'll say 24, and another half of it be another 12, so 36. Only then you are, rather a kav and a half is subject to challah. The Mishigdil Amidis, when the units of measure were increased by an edict in the town of Tzipori, so saying that the measure would be bigger now, they said that 5 revaim of flour is subject to challah. Remember, we said rova is just like a kav or log. Kav is 4 times, meaning you have to have 4 lugin in a kav, and so Mishigdil Amidus, when the units of measure were increased by an edict in Tzipori, they said that 5 revaim of flour is subject to challah. And in number 10 it says a rova plural revoim, means literally a quarter because it measures a quarter of a kav. It is the same amount as a log. The amount of an omer, which we said omer is also a measure, amount of an omer, which by Yerushalayim units equaled 6 lugin, when converted into Sipur units, divide by 1.5, becomes 5 lugin, which is the same thing as 5 revoim. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Chamisha Pturin, exactly 5 revoim of flour is exempt. Chamisha Void Chayovim, 5 plus, is liable. Ravuna proceeds to list the second dispute between Hillel and Shammai. Veidoch, another dispute between Hillel and Shammai, is recorded in the following Mishnah. Hillel Omer Meloi Hin Maim Shuvim, a full hin of drawn water, poislin as a mikveh. Disqualified a mikveh. How much is Meloi hin? So it says in number 13, a minimum amount of one hin of the water, regular water of Maim Shuvim, of Shuvim, is mixed into valid water, measuring less than 40 seah. The entire body of water is rendered unfit for the mikvah. So a hin, we're trying to find how much is a hin. It says a hin is a biblical measure, the equivalent of 12 lugin or 3 kabin. The rabbis did not disqualify a mikvah on account of she'uvin, water that is pumped, unless a significant amount was mixed in. In Hillel's opinion, one hin is regarded as significant because it is the largest unit of liquid. A hin is a biblical measure, the equivalent of 12 lugin or 3 kabin. The rabbis did not disqualify a mikveh on account of she'uvim, unless a significant amount was mixed in. In Hillel's opinion, one hin is regarded as significant because it is the largest unit of liquid measure mentioned in the Torah. So according to Hillel, if a hin of drawn water, a certain amount of drawn water was added into a mikvah, it disqualifies the mikvah. Shechayav Odom Lema B'Loshen Rabbi, Hillel, when pronouncing this law, chose the above wording because a person is required to say things in the language of his master. Shammai Emir Tisho Kabin. Shammai says 9 kabin of drawn water disqualify a mikveh. V'chachamim Oimrim, meaning 3 times the amount required by Hillel. In the case of Shammai, in this case, Shammai is more lenient because he says less amount needs to enter the mikvah. And Shammai Matisho Kam v'Chachamim, but the sages say lo yichad divrei zeh v'lo yichad divrei zeh, neither like the words of Shammai or the words of Hillel. Ad shebo shnei gardim mishar ashba shebeYerushalayim. The matter was in dispute until it once happened that 2 weavers came from the dung gate of Yerushalayim, Shara Ashpo, place where they used to put where the sanitation department was. Ve'idu mishum Shama v'Avtalion, and testified in the name of Shmaya and Avtalion, sheshloisha lugin maim shuvim poisem v'samikveh. So we see that it's not like Shammai and it's not like Hillel. V'kimu chacham mizdivreim, and all the sages endorsed their words and followed Shmaya and Avtalion. The 3 lugin would disqualify the mikvah. Ve'idach, of obviously maim shuv, and pumped water. Ve'idach, and the other dispute between Hillel and Shammai, Shammai yomer kol hanoshim dan shatam. That we learned previously in Tractate Nida, that all women, it suffices them that they be declared tameh from their time of observing a discharge and onwards. They are declared tameh retroactively from the last examination to the present examination. Even when the last examination took place many days before the present one. The rabbis said not like with Shammai and not like with Hillel. לא יחדי וזה ולא יחדי וזה, אלא מאס לאס ממית על יד מפקידה לפקידה, rather than say that the period of one full day reduces the time of retroactive tuma to less than from examination to examination, mepkida lefekida memayit al yad me'es leis, and the period from examination to examination reduces the time of retroactive tuma to less than one full day. The Gemara questions of Huna's assertion that Hillel and Shammai were in disagreement in 3 cases only. Vesu Leika, there's no more disagreements between Shammai and Hillel only in these cases. Hillel, for example, says one is obligated to lean his hands on a sacrifice which is offered on Yom Tov. You have to do semicha leaning. And Shammai said you don't have to do it. So here's another example where Shammai and Hillel are disputing each other. And according to Ravuna, it was only done by 3 cases. Ravuna meant, Ravuna said his statement, that Hillel and Shammai disagree in 3 cases only. He meant where there is no dispute of other great men together with them. But surely there is a case of the following Baisa Aboitza Legas, when someone harvests grapes for the wine press. Shammai say the grapes have become susceptible to tumah by the act of harvesting. But Hillel says that they have not become susceptible to tumah. That case is excluded. Because there Hillel was silent in face of the arguments of Shammai. It says in 33, after Hillel hearing the arguments, after Shammai heard the arguments of Hillel, Hillel submitted to his view. Since Hillel did not persist in his view, Ravuna did not enumerate this case in the dispute of Hillel and Shammai. Yossi ben Yoezer Yisrael of Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim goes l'tuma al Eretz Ha'amim v'al klei zechuchis. Yossi ben Yoezer, leader of Tzereda, and Yossi ben Yochanan, the leader of Yerushalayim, decreed tuma on the lands of the nations, and also on glassware. That's why we are tabling the glassware as well. The Gemara questions the identity of the legislators of these decrees. But surely it was the rabbis of 80 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, who issued these decrees. The Amar of Kang Shechol Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, when Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi fell ill, Rabbi Emor Lonu Shnayim Shlosha Dvar Shochlu. So the rabbi sent a messenger and they told him, tell us a few things. Tell us a few things. That you related to us, that you received in the name of your father. So he sent back to them. So said my father, 180 years before the Second Temple was destroyed, the wicked empire started to spread out over Israel. 80 years before the temple was destroyed. Gozu Tuma al Eretz Ha'amim. 80 years before the temple was destroyed, the rabbis decreed Tuma on glassware.
Land of the nations and on glassware,
yeah, land of the nations. Gozu Tuma al Eretz Ha'amim v'al chuchis. On the lands of the nations and glassware. 40 years before the temple was destroyed, Gol Solo Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin, which was the Supreme Court, moved away from its former seat in the temple precinct, and took its seat in a building on the Temple Mount called Chanuyos. As regard to what law does the relocation of the Sanhedrin have any significance? It comes to say by the Sanhedrin moving that they stopped judging. The Sanhedrin did not any longer judge cases involving penalty law. Do you really mean that cases involving penalty law were not judged once Sanhedrin moved away? Question mark. Rather say they not judge any longer capital cases. At any rate, we see from this report that the Sanhedrin concerning the lands of the nations and glassware were enacted by rabbis 80 years before the destruction, and not by the two rabbis Yossi has stated in the earlier Baisa. And if you will say that they also lived 80 years before the destruction of Atanya, it was already learned in Abaita, Hillel v'Shimon, Gamliel v'Shimon, Hillel and his son Shimon, his son Gamliel and his son Shimon, Nagu Nesiuson, held office as Nasi, Lifnei Abayis Me'ashana, before the destruction of the temple, 100 years while the temple was existed. Temple still existed. Ve'ilu Yosi ben Yoezer ish tzreida v'Yossi ben Yochanan havu kadmei tuva. Whereas Yossi ben Yoezer, the leader of Tzreida, and Yossi ben Yochanan were long before that. It is therefore not possible that the pair of rabbis Yossi lived as late as 80 years before the destruction. Ela osu inu gozo agusha l'Israel. Rather say that the pair of rabbis Yossi came and decreed Tuma on a clod of earth from the lands of the nations, to burn teruma that comes into contact with it. If the teruma comes in contact with clod of earth that is coming from outside, from the diaspora, it makes it impure. But they decreed nothing on the airspace of the lands of the nation. Subsequently, the rabbis of 80 years before the destruction, Gozu Avir Lislis, came and decreed Tuma, they decreed impurity on the airspace to suspend Teruma that enters into it. Lamemra, do you mean to say that it took one decree to consign the Teruma to burning? Ilfa said, Yodaim tchilosun gzerosun l'srefa. As regards hands, the original decree right from the beginning was for burning. Which means, in number 8, he says this refers to the decree imposing tuma on unrinsed hands. Right from the outset, the very first decree on hands stated that unrinsed hands caused teruma to be burnt. When it comes to, as regards to hands, was the original decree for burning, but not anything else. How then can you suggest that the two rabbis, Yossi, decreed that teruma should be burnt on account of clods from the lands of the nations? The pair of rabbis Yossi came and decreed Tuma on a clod of earth from lands of nations to suspend Teruma that comes into contact with it. But they decreed nothing on the airspace of lands of the diaspora. And subsequently, the rabbis of 80 years before the destruction came, Gozu Agusha Lisaf, and decreed Tuma on clod of earth to burn Teruma that comes into contact with it. Va'aviru Lislois, and also decreed Tuma on the airspace to suspend teruma that enters into it. Ve'akti, but still, this matter is not yet resolved. Be'usho gozu, because it was at much later period, when the seat of the Sanhedrin was in Usha, that they decreed tuma, they decreed impurity on the earth of the lands of the nations. As the Gemara will show now, that now al shishos fekos sofinus atuma, on account of 6 cases of doubtful tuma, one must burn teruma as follows: al sfeik beis hapras, on account of the doubtful tuma of an area known as beis hapras, which is an area which there exists a doubt as to the presence of grave or parts of a corpse. It's called beis hapras. Val sfeik ofo abo me'eretz amim, and on account of the doubtful tuma on earth that comes from the land of the nations. Val sfeik bigdei am ha'oretz, and on account of the doubtful tuma of garments of an am ha'oretz, of illiterate person, because you're not sure whether he's careful with the laws of not mixing wool and linen. Val sfek kelim animtzoim, and on account of the doubtful tuma of utensils that are found, not sure if they were used improperly. Val sfek horoikin, on an account of the doubtful tuma on spittle that is found. Vasfeik miragle odom, on account of the doubtful tuma of human urine. Shekeneged miragle beimot, that is in proximity to animals' urine. Va'alvade magon, for definite contact of these items with teruma. Val shu sofek tumosum, which constitutes a case of a doubtful tuma. Sofin as a tuma, just for the doubt, we must burn the teruma, the designated consecrated food. Rabbi Menahse would say, even if there is a doubt of contact in private domain, we would still have to burn them. The rabbi said in private domain, one suspends the teruma, meaning that the rabbis gave a compromise ruling regarding occurrences in a private domain. They're not as lenient as the first Tana, who holds that the teruma remains store, nor as strict as Rabbi Menahse, who holds that it must be burnt. The sages hold that teruma must be suspended, neither eaten nor burnt. It's going to stay in a limbo. B'shus ha'archit in a private domain suspends the teruma. B'shus ha'rabin in a public domain will declare the teruma toher, because we have a doubt whether it's whatever touches it, whether it's tameh or not. They enacted the tuma of these 6 doubtful cases. They were enacted in Usha, name of a place. We see that from this that the tuma of the lands of the nations was enacted in Usha, not earlier by the pair of rabbis and Yossi, or even 80 years before the destruction, as stated previously. So it was all enacted in Usha. Ela also inu gozo gushalisus. Rather, they, the pair of rabbis and Yossi, came and decreed tuma on a clod of earth from the lands of the nation to suspend teruma that comes into contact with it. Va'aviro v'lo klum, but they decreed nothing on the airspace of lands of the nations. Ve'osu rabbanon d'shmonim shana, and subsequently the rabbis of 80 years before the destruction came, gozu idi ve'idi lislois, and decreed to suspend the teruma in both cases. Avir, whether it's the air or cloud of earth, they decreed to suspend both in both cases. V'osu b'usha, and finally in Usha they came gozu agusho lisroif, and decreed tuma on cloud of earth to burn teruma that comes into contact with it. V'avira kedekoi koi, but as regards to the airspace, they added no stringency, and the existing decree stayed as it was to suspend teruma. The Gemara previously in 14b cited a brisa which mentioned 5 decrees passed by early Tanoim. Having completed its discussion of the first decree, the Tuma of the lands of the nations, the Gemara now proceeds to discuss the next decree, namely the Tuma of glassware. Klei zechuchis, my time gozu b'rabban. What's the reason that the rabbis decreed that it is susceptible to Tuma? My time gozu b'rabban on Tuma. For what reason? Omar Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rish Lakish, Oil v'schiloson briyoson menachol, since its very formation is from sand, Shavinu Rabbonon Kichli Cheres, the rabbis placed it in the same category of earthenware. The Gemara raises an objection to the comparison of glassware to an earthenware, even though both are made from sand. So according to this, it ought not to have the capacity to attain purity, tahara, by immersion in a mikveh, just as an earthware does not. So if you're comparing it to glassware, compare it all the way. I cannot kosher, immerse earthenware in the mikveh. I shouldn't be able to do the same thing to glassware. The following items from an intervention in the tevilah of utensils, chatzitza, there is an intervention. Pitch or musk on glassware. So we see that glassware is amenable to tevilah. We see that you can tevel it. The fact that the laws of interventions of chatzitza are applying to glassware, we see that you can kosher them by teveling them. With what case are we dealing with? A case where the glassware vessels became perforated and unusable. And one poured into them lead, melted or molten lead, to plug up the hole, rendering the vessel, now we turned the vessel to be usable again. He fixed it. Rabbi Meir, and the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Omar, Rabbi Meir said that the status of everything follows the part that maintains it. The lead that maintains it, everything, meaning that I'm, so to speak, ignoring the whole glass utensil, and I'm focusing on the lead that plugs the hole. The Gemara cites a brisa which shows that Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that the status of an article depends on the maintaining part of it. The Tanya, glassware that became perforated, and he poured molten lead into them to repair the hole. Rabbi Gamliel said, Rabbi Meir metam v'chacham metarim. Rabbi Meir declares a tome, but the sages declare a tohar. It is susceptible to tumah on account of its now being classed as metalware. It's no longer glassware, even though it's just a small amount of lead. It's considered metalware, not glassware. Chachomim metarim, rabbis, according to the sages, the vessel is not classed or classified as a metalware. Just because it has a metal plug doesn't make it metalware. The Gemara raises another objection to the comparison of glassware to earthenware. Ela me'ato, but according to this, lo litamu migabon, glass vessels ought not to incur tuma through their outer surface, just as earthenware does not. Lo litamu migabon. We just read about earthenware does not become tumah from its outside, only from the inside.
Right.
So Amatanan, why then have we learned to the contrary in the following Mishnah? We learned that klei cheres, uchlei neser, earthenware vessels, and natron vessels, tum'oson shova, their tuma are identical. Mitamin umetamim avireim, they both acquire tuma and convey tuma by their airspace. Umitamin me'achoirehen, and they also acquire tuma through a cavity on their exterior. Ve'ein metamin migaben, they do not acquire tuma through their outer surface. Ushvirosom metarosom, and by breaking it, rendering them toher. Shvirosom nitakanosom, only their breaking renders them toher. So we completed daf 15, page 15. And God willing, we'll continue next week. We're going to learn halacha in the next video.
We're going to learn tomorrow.